All right, let's kick things off. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on CRO, the art and science of conversion rate optimization. My name is Todd Hirschberg. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Intrepid, and I will be your host for this session. Our speakers are Matt Sjoquist, who is Director of Creative Strategy. He has over 15 years of experience as a copywriter and creative strategist in marketing, advertising, UX, and conversion-focused funnel optimization for SEM and SEO. Graham Howell is our data science specialist, and he's served as a data science specialist for numerous high-profile clients across the e-commerce landscape and handles reporting, testing, data analysis for numerous clients. I'm now going to turn this over to the folks who are far smarter than I. Matt, why don't you kick things off?
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're very excited to talk to you today about the art of CRO, convection range ovens. Oh, wait, hold on. I meant conversion rate optimization. That's the right one. We're going to talk about all these topics today. I'm going to mostly address the art aspect, and Graham will be talking about the science. But before we begin, I want to start with this. This is the most important concept that you'll hear about today. And as you think about how to implement CRO strategies, always keep this in mind as a guiding light. Maya was very wise here. This invokes a cognitive bias called the empathy gap, which basically means that people make decisions based mostly on emotion more than logic. So every point in your funnel, from ad to landing page, from messaging to design, from tiny details to the overall experience, it'll all make your prospect feel a certain way. Now, they may not remember the color of your button or the exact headline or how many form fields they had to fill out, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Will it be delighted, relieved, and motivated, or will it be frustrated and confused? These feelings, of course, affect immediate conversion, but they also affect the larger conversations, both the customer's internal monologue and public discourse on social media and word of mouth. And that can be the most powerful CRO tool of all. So let's start with some of the basics. CRO, what is it? Well, we all know what it is, right? It's the process of finding ways to get people to do what we want by offering them what they need. So I'm not going to dwell on that, but I want to talk about what is CRO really beyond that. So CRO should go beyond website optimization. It should be applied to the entire customer journey, as each step, as I just said, is a potential point of abandonment or loss of trust, as well as a potential point of building confidence and reinforcing positive emotional perception. This invokes a cognitive bias called attentional bias or availability cascade, which basically means the more someone sees your offer, tagline, value proposition, the more likely they are to believe it and buy into it. But that requires consistency. Any disruptions in the journey undermines that buildup. If you're not consistent from your ad to the landing page or from the landing page to the checkout, then how can the customer believe that you'll be consistent to your final product and that your final product will live up to your offer or claims? Okay, but what else is CRO? Well, CRO should also go beyond messaging and design. It can be applied to every element of the customer experience. All of these elements feed into how you make the customer feel. An overload of choices, they'll feel overwhelmed. Unclear messaging, confused or distrusting. Counterintuitive UX, they'll feel feeble or frustrated. Or inconsistencies make them dubious about your final product. Don't underestimate the power of the details, because you never know what detail is going to stand out and make an impact on your prospect in an emotional way. All of these elements must feed the same emotional output, and this leverages the cognitive bias we just talked about, the empathy gap. Put that to work for you and be conscious of it. Make your story, your visuals, and your UX flow work together to feed into that. This also invokes one of my favorite cognitive biases called the fluency effect. And it's very simple but profound. It means people like to feel fluent and proficient in navigating your funnel and your website. It evokes a positive emotion of competency that will make them more likely to feel connected with your product and hopefully convert. Here's the part that some marketers fail to connect. Subconsciously, the customer's experience with your website and your funnel, not just the offer, but the actual user experience, it largely determines their perception of your product. Just like any store or business whose exterior is falling apart, by the way, how clean do you think these motel rooms are going to be? Well, it's the same with your website. If it's cluttered or confusing, then the customer will think your product and your customer service may be as well. And if your website is clean and easy and helpful, then they're more likely to expect the same of your product. So let's talk about your customer, because that's really where everything starts. When it comes to capturing customers' attention, you're not just competing with other companies, right? You're competing with Facebook, Instagram, their 37 unread emails, and real world distractions like their kids' soccer practice in 45 minutes and that work project they need to finish. And yes, those other competitors whose websites may be cleaner and easier and faster. When a prospect lands on our website, we like to think, oh, here they are. They're joyfully stepping inside our wonderland, as excited as we are about our brand values and mission statement and the multitude of benefits that await them. For the most part, they're not, at least not yet. They're only thinking about solving their own problem. And at this point, to them, your website is a hurdle that they must get past to solve their problem. In fact, when they first land, they're just pushing their nose against the glass to peek inside. And if they don't see what they want quickly in 3 to 5 seconds, they will leave and get sucked back into that tornado of distractions. So this is why it's crucial to understand your customers as human beings, not just marketing leads, so that you can connect with them and compel them to action. And to me, that's the art of CRO. It's an art form of psychology, of design, of messaging, of imagery, and most importantly, of experience. That intangible essence of how your pieces all fit together in the customer's brain to solve their problem. Because that's where all of this takes place. And by the way, that brain is most likely multitasking, just like some of you right now as you're listening to me. And that's okay, because that's the real world. We're all stretched thin. We've all got online fatigue. And the more you understand that about your customer, the better you'll be able to connect with them and focus on their needs and compel them to convert. Before we dig into some details, I'd like to address what I consider to be 3 of the most important concepts in CRO and UX strategy. The first is cognitive load. This applies to every moment and every step. Make someone work too hard to find what they need, make them think too much, and you're very likely to lose them. Now, this manifests in every different way. In terms of messaging, keep the cognitive load down, keep things as simple as possible. Always think WIIFM, what's in it for me? How will you solve my problem? And what do I need to do on this page to get what I want? It also applies to your UX and the end actions. As clear, as simple as possible, as few choices as possible. Less is usually more, but you have to test to find your sweet spot. This invokes a cognitive bias called the paradox of choice. You may be familiar with this, but in short, it means that when people are overloaded with too many choices, they fall into analysis paralysis, meaning it's just harder to make a decision and they're less likely to be happy with their decisions afterwards. Cognitive load also applies to visuals. We want to guide the customer's eye with visual hierarchy, with F and Z patterns, which I'll talk about in the next slide, and using progressive disclosure, meaning you don't always expose all of your content, but you expose teasers and brief snippets that they can choose to look into or not. And this calls to mind one of the most important rules I like to keep in mind, which is that skipping content is as important as consuming it. In other words, giving the customer the power to skip over what they don't feel they're interested in or they need and focus on what they do want to focus on is just as important as them being able to read things. Now, the F pattern and Z pattern I just talked about, to guide someone's eye, it's critical to understand how people consume content. Their eyes move in an F pattern for copy-heavy sites and more of a Z pattern for more visual pages with minimal copy. Always guide their eye, or I like to say hold their hand, however it makes sense for them, and make this apply and make everything work together, your story, your actions, and your design. The last essential concept is the 5-second rule. Within 5 seconds of arriving at your site, and I actually would apply this to every step of the funnel, within 5 seconds, they need to understand, what is this? Why should I want it? And how do I get it? The way to do this is, again, using all three of those aspects, messaging, UX, and visuals. Use a powerful hook and a quickly scannable headline. Distill your value propositions to very, very brief phrases, and use visual hierarchy to guide their eye, reducing cognitive load and minimizing choices. Here's the hard truth. From the customer's point of view, your website and your company, it's just a hurdle to get what they want. And we sometimes overvalue the glory of our product. After all, we put our heart and soul into it every day. So tell your story, but only enough to help the customer progress through the funnel. And you can see in these examples I'm showing, they may not look too radically different at first, but you can see on the left, there's less guidance as to what is prioritized, what should I look at first. And on the right, we use a little bit more of kind of like that F pattern where we're showing them, here's the most important thing, here's a few summaries, and then here's how you get it. Now, moving on to best practices. A lot of people call them best practices. I like to call them test practices because these are guideposts, not gospel. What works on one site may not work on yours, and what works now may not work next quarter, and what works with one customer segment may not work with another. Now, let's just examine a few of these. CTA, a clear and compelling call to action. It's good. It's amazing the kind of impact these small changes can have. Testing, a link versus a button, testing button shapes, even squared buttons versus rounded buttons can make a difference. Testing color, and my favorite, testing generic or specific CTAs. It's impossible to declare what is the right strategy for everyone. You have to test your way into it. Another best practice is design that guides the eye. And we just talked about that. Don't make them work. Make their necessary action obvious. Use chunks of content and messaging that allow them to scan the page. And you can see on the left, there's not quite that kind of hierarchy that lets you know, okay, where should I go to first? And there's also not the clear summary of where are you and what is being offered. And on the right, we optimize the page to give a nice clean hierarchy and a nice clean direction to the most important actions to be taken. I'm going to stay on this for a minute. Also, another way to do this is with scannable buckets of content. So you can see in this example, this is a client who had kind of just in their conversion area, kind of just a stacked cluster of information, and not all of it immediately necessarily relevant to that point where the customer is in the funnel. And you're sort of forced to wade through all of this content without knowing really what's important and what's urgent right now. Now, this is just an example we used from a competitor who's doing it very well. And that is they've bucketed the information so you can scan it quickly and see, okay, there's the what, okay, there's the grouping of the why I should want it, and then there's how to get it. It's a very visually easy, clean flow. Another best practice is optimizing UX friction. Now, we've talked about creating easy, clear paths to conversion with a minimal cognitive load. And usually less friction is best, but not always. When I worked at justanswer.com years ago, an online expert Q&A site, we found that by making the visitor enter their question before presenting them with the easy sign up and the committing to a sign up, we increased conversion rate, even though it decreased click-through rate on the landing page. This is because we got the customer to invest in the process a little bit. And that is a cognitive bias called unit bias, which means that people like to finish what they've started. It's why I always finish that sub sandwich that when I'm already full, but I just finish it anyway, because what the heck, I already started. So it's important to test to find the right amount of friction that's right for your funnel. And also, as I said about the decreased click-through rate, but the increased conversion rate, it's important to think downstream and think holistically when you're analyzing your data. This is another example of optimizing UX friction. This is a company called Forward. And instead of making their primary CTA become a member or sign up now, they use a softer intake that says, am I a candidate? And you can see on the right, they put the prospect through a series of brief intake questions. And that's another example of unit bias. Now, it's tricky to do this. And in some cases, you can get an incremental investment by the prospect to make them more likely to convert later. Imagery. Testing graphics versus photos. Testing whether you're visualizing the product or you're visualizing the benefit of the product. A single person versus a group. Testing ethnicity, gender, happy, serious. And my favorite, eyes on the prize. If you have a single person in the photo, usually you want to make sure they're looking where you want the visitor to look. That directs the visitor's eye to the desired action, and it creates a more cohesive feel to your design. And it subconsciously makes the visitor feel like you're being helpful and you're aware of them. Messaging that inspires. Connect emotionally, write powerfully, be succinct. Even fairly serious products like Clio. Clio is the world's leading legal practice management software. And this is some work we did for them with their Facebook ads. Even fairly serious products like Clio have a kind of emotional benefit tied to it, like it lowers stress or it makes you better at what you do. Tap into that feeling as a hook and support it with consistent, rock solid, scannable chunk content. We were lucky enough to achieve quite a significant increase in click-through rate with these ads, and we're proud of this work. Moving on to value propositions, I'm going to stay with Clio. Now, we did not work on this. This is their homepage. We did not work on this page, but I love it so much I wanted to use it as an example. It's important to distill value propositions down, distill them down even more and even more, make them minimal and powerful. Writing this way is a difficult skill. It's better to say too little than too much. A cluttered, copy-heavy page, no matter how brilliantly written, will generally cause abandonment. As you can see in this copy with Clio, they have not wasted a single word. Everything your law firm needs, all in one place. Short phrases, powerful benefits, and the subhead, simplify every aspect of your law firm, from billing to communication and document management. There is not a wasted pixel. There's not a wasted letter in that headline and subhead. And you can see they also extol the benefits graphically on the other parts of the page. It's a really well done page, and I love that. The rest of the best practices are fairly self-explanatory. Social proof and trust signals, we all know about those. Relevance, personalizing and segmenting your funnel, tailoring it per demographics, interest, or past behavior, tending to core web vitals, and of course, mobile optimization. The main thing I want to stress here is ABT, always be testing. It's important to be courageous and take chances and figure out what's going to work. And even if a test doesn't work, that's okay. That's a learning and you can build on it. Now let's talk a little bit about cognitive biases and the psychology behind customer behavior. Cognitive biases, well, they're perceptions that influence your thinking and make you act in irrational ways. And it affects how visitors think and feel about your product and brand. I'm just going to address a few of them. There are dozens and dozens of these, and I highly recommend looking into them. They're fun to learn about. They apply to everyday life, and they apply to CRO. One that I love is zero risk bias, addressing concerns, preempting any conversion blockers. Use empathy or research to figure out what kind of conversion blockers may exist in your prospect's mind and preempt them. Another one is scarcity effect or fear of missing out. People are generally very motivated more strongly by the fear or loss of opportunity. And, we've all seen these tactics used around the web, only two left, limited time only. It is powerful. Anchoring effect and framing effect. So with anchoring effect, the first information you present is the reference point, and the rest is compared to it. And you've all seen this with displaying a discounted price next to a regular price, or displaying a higher priced option before a preferred option. Bandwagon effect. I don't have to explain this one. We all get it. Most popular choice. And one that I think is very powerful is for signups. Instead of subscribe to our email list, join the 50,000 product leaders who already get our newsletter. We're always more comfortable as human beings. We're more comfortable when others lead the way. Fluency effect. Now, this is an example I already used, but I just want to re-emphasize this. Everyone loves shortcuts. Everyone likes to feel smart. Keep things scannable, bucketed, and chunked and clean. The paradox of choice that we just talked about. So this was based on a JAM study where a grocery store conducted 2 tasting sessions. And in one, they offered 24 flavors, and in another, they offered 6 flavors. And you can see here by the results, when people have fewer choices, they're more likely to feel comfortable with their choice. And even there's a downstream effect on this where people are happier with their choice after the purchase, which of course reduces your customer service load, your returns, or whatever metric may be relevant to you. And remember, this applies not just to your product, but also, as I said before, the UX of the page. If there's too many things to click on, too many things to choose from, it can be overwhelming and it will generally cause abandonment. Curse of knowledge. So it's easy to make false assumptions about customer knowledge and awareness. We live with our product every day. It's in our face. We know so much about it. Sometimes it's hard to remember that not everybody is coming into your funnel with the same context of knowledge. So it's important to mentally back up to the customer's point of view, strive to see things from the point of view of somebody who knows absolutely nothing and is distracted with a short attention span. And it's good to use qualitative research to understand some of these things, how customers see and comprehend your product. I can't tell you how many times I've been amazed listening to user testing videos for a landing page where I thought something was so obvious, we don't need to explain it, but people were not aware of it. I'm going to end here with a case study example. And this is a good example of how little tiny details can feed into emotional output and have a huge effect on your metrics. So this is a project we did for the Nile. They are Amazon's primary competitor in Australia. And as you can see, we were able to achieve quite a significant increase in some important metrics like revenue and conversion rate and average order value. On the left is the original, on the right is our optimized page. I'm going to walk you through a few of the things we did. One is testing button color and testing a CTA that reduces friction. Now, buy now versus add to cart. I like this example because we're all very familiar with it. but we don't always think about the implications, right? The emotional implications of committing to buying something now versus committing to just adding it to your cart, right? Adding to cart is lower friction, less of a commitment. Also, the pricing area. Now, this seems like a really tiny detail, but it's so important. You can see on the left here, there was a little line that offers a financing option. We simply move that below the button. What this does is you can see on the right, it removes that visual obstacle between the price and the conversion mechanism. Again, it seems like a minute detail, but it's a big impact psychologically for the customer to be able to just look at the price and go straight to the button without having to wrestle with another choice. Also, shipping info. They had it broken into two different sections on the left. We consolidated that into one section to reduce cognitive load. And it also addresses a cognitive bias called the ambiguity effect, where it's similar to zero risk bias, where you're addressing possible concerns that may block conversion. Here we removed the wish list option on the left and changed it to an icon, and we made room for these two zero risk elements on the right, which are 30-day money back guarantee and secure transaction. And finally, information overload. So this just has to do with determining what content is absolutely essential for the user at this point and what can wait till later. And sometimes a good way to deal with that is hiding it behind progressive disclosure, a show more or a read more. It also just reduces the clutter on the page and allows the user to focus on what we want them to focus on. So as a final thought, aim to delight your customers. If you quickly show how you can solve their problem, they'll happily convert. But beware, with all the distractions out there and our diminished attention span, the first sign of frustration or confusion will cause your happy customer to turn into an unhappy one, and they'll be lost forever. So thank you for listening. I'm now going to pass you into the capable hands of Graham to talk about the nuts and bolts of testing.
Thank you, Matt. You want to kill your screen share real quick so I can swap over to mine, and then we'll kick this off. So I hope everyone's mind is buzzing with great ideas from Matt's concepts of how you can apply this to your own website. I'm here to talk to you about how you can test these changes, because as a data person, I think you should gather as much information as possible before you make permanent changes to your website, if you can. So to kick things off, I'm going to talk about 4 different types of tests that you can use in your CRO efforts here. The first one is the on-page A/B test, which is, in a nutshell, someone lands on the page that you're testing. A little script runs, usually part of the A/B testing software, that will roll the dice, figure out should this person see the original version of your website or the test version. And then it will change the elements on page accordingly if the person lands in the test group. So this is great for testing small changes, the copy, the changing button colors, maybe rearranging some icons. And it can run multivariate tests of this, which is a whole rabbit hole, but essentially this is running multiple tests at the same time and seeing what combinations of elements work best for your customer group. This, because we're testing small changes, it typically requires very little dev work. Most A/B testing softwares are like point and click visual editors, so you don't need to have any kind of technical background in order to make these A/B tests work. But as a potential consequence here, there can be performance issues for larger changes, and there's no real quantifiable, this is what is a small change, this is what is a large change. It's kind of something you have to do by feel or kind of discover for yourself in QA as you're making these tests. The next kind of test kind of works to assuage that downside of the on-page A/B test, and that's a redirect test. It works very similar to the on-page A/B test, where someone lands on the page that you're testing and the script will roll the dice and figure out if the person is going to see the test or not. But instead of making the changes to the current page that they're on, if the visitor is in the test group, then it's going to send them to an entirely different page. which makes it great for large changes, particularly redesigns, where you don't need to be waiting on a script to implement all these changes step by step. It's just send them to a new page and you don't really have to wait on that load time. This can be used for entire flows, not just a single page. So if you have a multi-page checkout versus a single page checkout, that's something that you would do with a redirect test. But because these are bigger changes, these usually require dev work, is you actually have to have another page published on your website that has these test changes made to them. And as an SEO agency here at Intrepid, we think about this a lot, which is the SEO risks of using a redirect test for high traffic landing pages. The short and sweet of it is Google officially says, no, they do not ding pages for running A/B test or running redirect tests on your landing pages, as long as you follow a couple little rules. We've known Google to sometimes say one thing and do another, so we remain skeptical on the risk of running a redirect test on high traffic organic landing pages. Now, the third test type here aims to fix that shortcoming of the redirect tests, and it's by using a split template, which instead of doing any of the script, no rolling the dice or anything, is just taking the changes that you want to make and applying them to a copy of the page template. And then for all the pages that you have on that template, think about all your blog pages, you're going to take a portion of those, put them on the new template, and keep the original, designated portion on the old template, and then you compare those two groups' performance side by side. So there's no scripting involved, so it doesn't have any SEO or page performance risks for doing this split template test. It can actually measure the SEO impact, so you can see is the new template going to be better for rankings, and see if those pages are improving or dropping faster than the original pages. And you can test however big of changes you want on this. This is really where you can kind of shine. However, the big limitation here is that it has to be a page template that has a lot of pages on it. You can't just run this for your one particular campaign landing page. You can't run this for copy changes that are for specific sections on pages. These have to be pretty broad, sweeping changes to test on a split template. Now, when all of, this also requires dev work. Now, when all of this fails, the last resort here, and I include this as a kind of, here's a data science person sanctioning you, telling you it's okay if you have to do this, if you really can't test this any other way. And it's the before and after analysis. This is where you just make the damn change and you analyze, was the conversion rate of the website, whatever you're trying to get the user to do, was it better or worse after you made the change? So you can do this on pages with limited traffic, which is one of the big reasons to do this, where you don't have enough traffic to become statistically significant using any of the other test types. You can do this any which way you want to do. It doesn't carry any of the limitations of the other tests that you have to worry about. But you also aren't able to really isolate the impact of this quote unquote test here. If someone runs a marketing campaign at the same time that you just made this change, then you don't really know if your improved performance after you made the change is due to what you did or due to that marketing campaign that just launched. And along those same notes, seasonality is not controlled for here. So if you typically have a really great back to school season and you start you make your change now, you need to keep that in mind, that your numbers may look great after you make the change, but that's because we're getting ready to go back to school in early August and people might be stocking up. So there's a pitfall there where you could mask the real effect of the change that you made. And like all the others, I'll call this out, requires dev work. If dev is going to be your bottleneck for these things, then using the on-page A/B test may be what you're limited to. So I have a quick little flow here for kind of organizing these 4 different test types. And there are many more test types that you can run. This is really just a demonstrative list here. But when you've got a brilliant test idea that's going to apply all of the concepts that Matt has taught us. First question is, do you actually have control over what you want to test? Examples of when you wouldn't have control are things like third-party tools that are plugged into your website and you can't have multiple versions of that running at the same time. Or if you have like a specific offer or copy that really has to be consistent throughout the entire website, there cannot be any variance on that, kind of like a financing offer or something like that. If you don't have control over that, then do what you can if there is a little leeway, but this is your out for using that before and after. Split template is best. Redirect is okay if you can, but that before and after, here's your out. Now, you do have full control over it. This is something that's firmly on your web page. You gotta ask yourself, how big of a change is it? And again, there is no quantifiable, this is what a big change is, this is what a small change is. You'll kind of get a feel for it as you go through these, but if it is a small change, then go for the on-page A/B test. It's short and simple there. If it's a big change, then you ask the question, can it be run on multiple pages or as a single page test? If it can be run on multiple pages, split template test I think is strictly better than a redirect test. But if you can only do it on the one page, like as a change that's specific to that page, do something in the copy like that, redirect test is going to be your way to go. And I'll include my initial disclosure here that it's demonstrative, not exhaustive, and of course, your own process as you're making this decision. You should keep in mind the specific context of your team, how much dev capacity you have, how sensitive you are to SEO risk, and what kind of you can juggle at the same time here. So after you've set up this test, you've picked out the perfect test type for it, you have to decide how you're going to measure it. So this is a whole rabbit hole. Tip of the iceberg, though, is you can ask yourself these three questions to figure out how decide how you're going to measure this test. What is it that you want the users to do? What do you think that your change is going to, how do you think that your change is going to affect that? And then how broad or narrow is the impact? Now, the first two there, I think, are pretty self-explanatory, but that broad or narrowness of the impact is really a question of like, what else could happen besides what you hypothesized? A really narrow test would be something like changing the CTA. That's either it makes the button more attractive to them or it doesn't. A very broad test might be something like changing the design of the page, or kind of an example of medium tests to give you an idea of the secondary effects that are possible is using something like progressive disclosure, where you're now hiding more information on the page. You may think, okay, your primary hypothesis is that it moves through to the CTA faster, brings the focus there, but it might make people go to your about page more often or spend more time on a page and increase the length of time to conversion. So those are the kind of secondary effects, and that's why I have a picture of Mean Joe Green on here, because there's a Coca-Cola ad from 1979 ran through 1980, where they used Mean Joe Green. It was a fantastic ad that got lots of attention, but it was considered a failure by Coca-Cola executives at the time because reportedly it didn't improve their primary KPI, which was sales. They launched this commercial to try and increase sales. However, the ad went on to win awards. It's been parodied across countless shows now, and I wasn't even alive back then. I'm still talking about it. So there have been plenty of secondary effects that came from this marketing effort. The last thing on this is you should, of course, decide your KPIs before you actually launch the test. The reason for this is that you don't want to change the rules of the game partway through. Don't let the initial results influence your perception of the test, and don't want your own biases worming your way into the objective decision of, is this a good change or a bad change for your website? So after you've decided to how you're going to measure the test, you've launched the test, you eventually have to finish the test. And I'm going to tell you how to do it by the book, and then I'll tell you how to maybe get a little loosey-goosey with it. So by the book, a CRO test is essentially a hypothesis test in statistics. That means it's going to be done when you have a set level of confidence in the test results. Usually that is 95%, 9%, or 80% if you're reading a stats textbook. A confidence level just means what is the probability that there is a real difference between the test group and the control group that for this test. 95%, that's a very textbook number that's pulled out there. In the real world, I have seen it as low as 70% be accepted threshold for confidence. Now, the things that increase the confidence level in a test is how strong the signal is, which you don't know how strong the signal is. That's why you're running a test, and how large the sample size is. So the more people who see your test, the higher your confidence interval is going to be. That means that the longer that you run your test, that a higher confidence interval is going to be, which means that tests at the top of your funnel, where you have more traffic, are going to take a shorter amount of time to reach statistical significance or stat sig if you're cool, than tests at the bottom of your funnel. The good news here is that if you're using a testing software, then that's going to keep track of this for you. You typically are not going to have to do math. You're not going to have to learn statistics in order to be able to start implementing some of these CRO tactics. Now, the less than by the book, the way of doing this is really catered to all the small business folks or all of the pages that don't yet have traffic. You don't have 12 weeks to wait on test results. So for these people, we loosen the rules a little bit here. There are no CRO police that are going to come bring the hammer down if you implement something on your website with less than perfect statistical methods. I do encourage you still do the test, and if you can, and kind of follow a couple easy guidelines here of let the test run for at least 2 weeks. And the reason for that is we want to try to eliminate some of the time risk of not getting representative sample of traffic on that page, and then let it go for 100 conversions for whatever your primary KPI is. And that is really just to kind of let StatSig have a chance of getting somewhere and not have the risk of, you flip a coin 10 times, you may get 7 heads and 3 tails. If you flip a coin 100 times, if you get 70 heads and 30 tails, something's probably up with that coin. So you've decided on whether a test is a winner or loser. So here's just what you should do after that. For winning tests, you can determine this based on whatever your primary KPI is and a mixture of those secondary effects. So definitely keep, look at your traffic segments, see what else they do, see what might have happened that you didn't expect. Those secondary effects usually shouldn't be counted as much as your primary KPIs. But if your primary KPI shows no change, but you see some positive secondary effects, that can be criteria for calling a test a winner. Once you have this winner, of course, implement it. It's going to help your business. You have the evidence of that, but also reflect on it. Why was it a winner? Did it work exactly as you hypothesized? Or were there more secondary effects that could add some wiggle room to how your customers reacted to this change? And that is both a good exercise for understanding your customer group and how they work, but also it can generate more test ideas after that. For losing tests, the most important bit here is that you're going to have losing tests. That is just the nature of the game. You will not, if you have the right idea every time, then first of all, you should get a promotion, and second of all, you don't exist. So accept the losers as they come, accept it with grace, and then reflect on it. Why didn't it work? What were you wrong about? What assumptions had you made? And if you get some answers for that why, figure out how you can verify that and form more tests. Always be testing. That's a theme here. I'll add on this for the losing tests. There are some tools out there, Crazy Egg and Mouseflow are a couple of examples where they will take recordings of your users' browsing sessions. So you can see kind of add that qualitative analysis and see what your customers were seeing when they encountered your test. Maybe there was a technical glitch that impacts the results. Maybe they got really frustrated when they encountered the element. They were looking for more information and they couldn't find it for some reason. These kind of things can just help color your ideas of why this test didn't work. Now, this has been a great brief overview of things. I'm sure that you guys have lots of questions, so we will be turning it over now to Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. That was very informative and awesome. We've got a couple of questions that have come in. I guess number one, what are the A/B testing tools that you find most useful or you recommend? Are there any?
Yeah, great question. So kind of at the head of the industry for a while has been Google Optimize, because it is free and it covers all of the functionalities that you can hope for it. However, that is going away September 30th. Google has announced that sunset date and does not have a replacement lined up. So a couple of alternatives out there on the market right now. If you are at enterprise level, Optimizely has been leading the industry there. It does cost a good bit. They have definitely made that decision to cater towards enterprise level clients, but it has all of the functionality and more. Definitely a very robust platform. For lower cost options, VWO is one that is kind of been surging since Google Optimize announced its sunset. It has the visual editor like Google Optimize had, and it has a few other nifty features to it. They do have a free tier, and then their pricing plan from there goes by how much traffic is going to be seeing the test. But in general, A/B testing software is pretty prolific now. Most other marketing tools will incorporate some level of A/B testing in their interface. So I encourage you to look at your tech stack and figure out, do you already have an A/B testing tool at your disposal before you add something new to it?
Okay, awesome. Another question we've got here is, are there any best colors for CTA buttons, or are there ones that you recommend?
Rainbow.
Yeah.
No, there is no set answer for this. There's been quite a few studies out in recent years talking about red and orange buttons being the magical answer. But the truth is, you just have to test your way into figuring out what color works for you. The more essential concept is not specifically what color, but more about how that color makes your button stand out on your site, whether it kind of gets lost in your site's color theme or whether it stands out from that color theme. That's more of the essential concept. So I would just more focus on making the button stand out and testing your way into figuring out what resonates best with your customers. Having said that, orange and red and yellow are not bad choices to start with, to try. I think if you've heard of this website called Amazon, they use yellow and orange, and Amazon does defy some best practices because they are Amazon. They are a unique situation, but sometimes what they do can be a good guiding light. And so starting with yellow or orange can be a good idea, but test your way into it.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Are there different CRO considerations for SEM or paid traffic versus SEO, organic traffic, and what are those?
Right. So I think we all know those are wildly different audiences. Again, going back to putting ourselves in the customer's mindset, organic traffic, customers are generally in a more of an exploratory mode where they're exploring and looking to consume information. So your landing page is going to have more options on it, heavier content, more choices. It's going to be more robust. Whereas paid traffic tends to be more singularly focused. So you're going to want your landing page to have fewer choices, be laser focused on conversion, and don't give people, generally, don't give them really any other escape hatch other than your conversion mechanism.
Cool. Thank you. Let's see. How do you recommend selecting pages to test to make sure they get enough volume to get stat sig or statistical significance? What if you have a page that's got low volume that you really want to test things on?
Sure. So
Graham and I
this is
just dealt
where
with this, right, Graham? We just
Yep.
dealt with this.
Oh, so this is where Google Analytics is your friend, or Adobe Analytics, whatever you're using to keep track of your traffic and your conversions online. So I would start with looking at, for the last 30-day period, how much traffic do you have on all of your pages, particularly paying attention to the pages that you really want to test, and then seeing how many conversions that traffic you've got. So this is the people who passed through those pages. How many in conversions do they have, or how many times did they convert on that particular page, do the action that you want them to do. When you have that numbers, and I'm saying like export it all, get it into an Excel spreadsheet, what Matt just referred to, we did this last month for a client that had a lot of low traffic pages. You can pull all of that out into a spreadsheet and then extrapolate from there, like how many conversions per week is this page getting and how much traffic is the page getting, and see the conversion rate, compare that conversion rate to the site average, or really to the average of the other pages that are at that stage of the funnel. So your product pages you want to compare to other product pages if you're on if you're not just testing the entire template, or if it's a lead gen, then kind of you want to compare your landing pages against each other versus comparing your kind of more middle step stuff against each other. And from there you can figure out, well, if I did run a test, how long is it going to take me to get to 100 conversions for each of these areas? So that page that has low traffic that you really want to test, you can see if it's going to take 6 weeks to get to 100 conversions, well, maybe that's within your tolerance range. If it's going to take 20 weeks, then it's probably not. And that's where, no CRO police, you can do the before and after in that case.
I'd like to just add to that, when there's a low traffic page that you feel has a lot of potential, think upstream and downstream as well, especially upstream, right? Like, why is it getting, what's the entry point? Is there some optimization you work on the entry point to get more traffic to it? And also consider, as Graham's considering all those different factors and your tolerance for waiting, also consider the resources involved and the potential gain from the page. Sometimes looking at those numbers, like what will a 10% lift get me? Sometimes that kind of brings to light whether or not it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Thank you. We have time for one last question. Is there a maximum number of different CTAs you should have on an average page? So you have sign up for newsletter, free trial, get in touch with us, etc. Is that too many, or is there a sort of a magic number?
Of course, a lot of these things, it always depends on your product and your experience. Generally, I would kind of segment it, right? So I would think about the hero section as one area. And generally, I don't want to have more than 2 CTAs in that area. And to be even more specific, I only want 1 primary CTA. So I would say there is a magic number of just 1 primary CTA. If there's going to be another CTA, then you're going to want to use either a text link or a hollow button rather than another solid button. But you never, ever want to have 2 equally weighted solid choices. You always want to have 1 preferred pathway. And that taps into what I said about cognitive load, right? Not making people figure out, like, why do I have 2 equally weighted choices? What's the difference? And even just a few seconds it takes to contemplate that can be enough to cause abandonment. So my answer would be 1 primary CTA, maybe a secondary CTA, possibly other CTAs in the top nav or below the fold. But as far as the immediately viewable area in the hero section, be very strict about guiding the user down one preferred path.
Awesome. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And thank you to our audience who showed up and supported this. If you have any additional questions, or if you're watching this as a on-demand stream, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can find us at intrepidonline.com, and just go to the contact us form, and you can contact us directly from there. Thanks again, everyone, and have a fantastic day. Take care.